Well, y'all don't need to know anything about me. But it reminds me, I'm trying to remember who said it, but maybe it was one of the saints, but preach constantly, but seldom use words, or try to use words, only every once in a while. You live through your life. What you need to know about me is what you can see, things like that. And if you could have seen me earlier, you would have seen oatmeal all over my lap driving up here from El Paso today. So I'm really glad that I meditated this morning, because, when you squeeze an orange, what do you get? Orange juice. When you squeeze Bram, what do you get? Well, it all depends on whether I've been meditating or not. And thank you, God, I've been meditating, because I was like, well, darn. So it took me a few minutes to get cleaned up. But anyway, it's always great to be here. Namaste, everyone. Shalom, Om Shanti, bendiciones. Always so good to be here. I watched, what's amazing to me is how wonderful and dynamic this center is. And thank you for creating this. I love listening to the different messages. And so I listened to Reverend Bonnie earlier last week or a couple of weeks ago, and then Peggy. And then there was something between Peggy and Randy, and I'm like, wait a minute, the color back here has changed. And so now I know there's some of you that fall asleep during my messages, but the bright orange always helped. So please, with this wonderful color, please try to stay awake today during the 4-hour message. No, not that long. Skip asked me, he said, what is your talk going to be about? And I said, choose your words wisely, because as we know, this month is participating in the role of creation, and the affirmation this month is all of God's creation's work. Which makes me wonder if God is watching some of my working crews, and really, are they working some of the times? I think the better way to put it is, some of God's creations work a little more than others, perhaps, is the way I would look at it. When I was listening to Reverend Bonnie's message, I had no idea you could use socialism, communism, creation, and competition all in the same sentence, much less from up here. Absolutely wonderful. And that's what's so dynamic about the different speakers. You get a different take from everybody. And then listening to Reverend Randy last week is fantastic. His 7 processes for creation, and listening to that, and how just cool and calm and wonderful he is. I love listening to him. But I got to tell you, this month, listening to Peggy's message is what really spoke to me. And a number of things that she talked about. I believe she talked about conscious language. And I think about that, and the words that we use, the thoughts we think. She said that language is our software, and if we upgrade our software from time to time on our computers, why wouldn't we be willing to do that with our own software, the words, the thoughts that we use, that create, often by default, our own life? Just a change of a word here or there, a different thought pattern to create a new reality. So for me, rebooting my software often means just changing the words that I use. Besides my meditation and prayer and things, really changing some of the words that I use. Peggy reminded us to be still and know that I am God, realizing that I am is your real name, and that anything that we state after I am is what we're creating in our lives. So when I drive the kids to school, and thank goodness Baylor's 16 now, and I don't have to take him to swim practice at 5 a.m. anymore. But when I drive Brenda to school, and we'll say a couple of things, and then I'll ask her to repeat after me, and it's always, I am. Well, I am prosperous. I am abundant. I am the head and not the tail. I am grateful. I am loving and I am loved. I am forgiving and I am forgiven. I am. I am that I am, and I am blessed. And I'm not sure that she always gets why we say all that stuff, but she repeats it. And then I asked her to do the prayer of St. Francis, because no matter how many years we've done this, I've not committed that to memory yet. And she sets all that stuff to memory, which is wonderful. So I didn't see Larry here today, but one of the things I wanted to talk about was NLP. I have a master's degree in neuro-linguistic programming, which is NLP for short. And neuro, of the brain, of our computer. The linguistic part, the language that we use, and the language not being just the words, because the words in any communication is only 7% of the communication. The other 93% of our communication is intonation, inflection, cadence, rhythm, and body language. And then the programming part is how we input and how we retrieve the information out of our computer. So it was before I learned in Science of Mind that thoughts held in mind produce of their kind. I learned years ago through NLP to pay attention to our words, and it was more in the classroom setting, if you will. But one of my teachers taught me quickly that whatever you say, that the mind doesn't process negation. And y'all have heard me say that before. So when you see that sign on the freeway that says don't drink and drive, all the mind is processing is drink and drive. Everything after no or don't is what the mind processes. So, I think if you look now, some of the language that they use is drive sober. Things like that instead of don't drink and drive. I think about how I raised my kids. I tried to never tell them. I tried to rarely, if ever, tell them, don't do this or don't do that. I mean, Baylor went out last night and I said, hey, have fun. I didn't say be careful. I said, pay attention and be safe. Two very different energies. And so those are the things that I try to think about, because thoughts matter, because our thoughts become matter. Nothing ever came into manifestation before it was thought of and spoken into reality. And we can create the conditions of our lives by the feelings, our vibrations, and then the thoughts that we entertain and the words that we use. It says in the book, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. In John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In Psalms, it says, by the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. In Hebrews, it says, by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of the things which are visible. Here it's talking about the vibrations, our thoughts, our feelings that create things. In Matthew, we read, it is written, a person shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So this word thing, it must be important because it talks about it over and over in many of the scriptures. Wouldn't it be great if we had the ability to speak into our word that completely change our lives and to be able to create exactly what we want just by using our words? Wouldn't it be great if God said to each one of us, you can have all the health, the wealth, the abundance, anything and everything you want just by the choice of your words? Well, that is in fact what we've been told. But too many of us say, oh, no, it's okay. Really, I don't need that. In Deuteronomy, it says, but the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so that you can do it. The heart part is the feeling. So in this part of the scripture, God is speaking to Moses and giving him a commandment of how to live a spiritual life. And it's so interesting because even though the instructions are plain and simple, pay attention to the thoughts, our feelings, and our words. This is not just written in the truth book. In fact, the truth book as we know it, the Bible, this was in Deuteronomy. The Bible didn't even exist back then. So I think that's important. The words are the most powerful agents of the mind that we use. Every time we speak, we cause the atoms to tremble and change. Not only do we cause the atoms of our own bodies to change their positions, but we raise and lower the rate of vibration and otherwise affect the bodies of the other people around us that we come in contact with. My goodness, my ex-wife could say one word and give me one look and I'd want to vibrate out of the room. Actually, that's not true. She's actually very lovely. But we have met people, we know people that can just say something or give us that look and you just, I just want to get out of here. That's the power that we have in our thoughts and in our words. So I read about a scientific experiment that took place. They took a bunch of iron filings and they put them on a piece of metal and they struck a note. And when they struck that note, the iron filings moved themselves around and created the pattern of a star all by themselves. Then they struck another note again and again, and the iron filings all moved around and created the symbol of a snowflake. So thoughts matter, vibrations matter. They can change things around us. Thoughts have specific vibrations, and I think of a book that I read one time called Power versus Force. Hawking wrote that, and it talks about the vibration of the words that we use. When I was running TV stations, I could never get our producers or the writers to even look through that book to think about how we would, present a story, which is why I don't watch local news or any news for that matter anymore. It's just low vibration. It really is, and I think we need to pay attention to where we spend our energy and where we put that. Because often the words that we use are just by habit. They're lazy words. It's Wayne Dyer talked about the memes, the self-limiting thought patterns, the beliefs that we have, and it's just, they become ingrained and we just use them for so long that we just think that they're okay. We've learned over a lifetime to speak the world's words of lack, limitation, sickness, and all of its derivations. We've spoken them a million times. And when we're not happy, we want to change, but often we wonder how to change. And Peggy was talking about it the other day. She said something about when somebody invited her somewhere. Maybe it was Teresa invited her over. She said, well, I'll try to go. And then she talked about, well, my intent is to go. That's something different. When I think of the word try, I just think of the Nike slogan, just do it. There is no try. Either you do it or you don't. And both are okay, but what are you going to do with that? Other words that we hear every day, but. You know, Doug, that's a great tie, but, I'm not too sure I would have, blah, 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 blah. Anytime you hear the word but, you just negated everything before that. So listen to sentence structure. Listen to the words that you're being spoken to. Listen to the words that you use. So I try to use the word and instead of but when I think about those things. And then we talk about the memes again. You think about, oh, that was just so delicious, it was to die for. And believe me, folks, there's a lot of stuff I love to eat. I've never eaten anything that was to die for. Oh, but Bram, it's just an expression. Is it? Either we believe that the thoughts, the feelings, the words that we use create our reality, or they don't. You can't just dismiss that stuff away. Or you'll hear somebody say, oh, I just can't imagine. Well, I bet you can't. And if you can't imagine it, then you can't envision it. You can't create it. So we pay attention to these words. Or, well, it just never works for me. You're absolutely right. Because whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, as Henry Ford said, you're right. I come out of the television business, my past and things like that, and I think about the words and the message that we're given. Well, it's cold and flu season. Really? Or it's allergy season, which for me it was last night, but I got past that. And so you think about those things. So if you live anywhere near or around me, or if we're around each other, there's a couple of words that you'll often hear me use. It's cancel clear. Peggy used it the other day. Cancel clear. If I hear something that either I say or one of my kids say or something, cancel clear. So I was at the baseball game the other night with my girlfriend and her kids, and she said something, and her 8-year-old daughter just looked up, cancel clear, Mommy, cancel clear. I'm like, yes, getting through to someone. We must become awake and aware of the words that we use proceeding from our mouth and the cost that they have in what we are creating. I think at the end of the service, we have the song that we sing up here. And you look at the words and we have to ask ourselves, is it positive? Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? In Matthew, Jesus says, listen and understand it is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles. Think about that. There are only two things you and I can do with the tool of our words, and we can either build up or we can tear down. The question people ask is, can I really change the words that come out of my mouth? Do I have the power? Can I be in control? Well, we are God's extremely capable creations. We can do any of this. It takes a little discipline, a little focus. In Isaiah, it says, so shall my word be that goes out of my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose and succeed in the thing for which I sent it. Powerful stuff. You are the light of the world. And when I read that and I hear that, I think of a light bulb, but it's not the light bulb, it's our vibration that we're sending out. That's what it's talking about, the light. So what are we shining upon? What are we illuminating with our energy and our vibration? We're energizing ourselves, our body temple, and the people around us. The power of the words is what binds us together. First there's the thought, then the word, and then that dwells within us, inside this word of pure potential for our health, our career, whatever it is that we're searching for. That becomes the God-given creative power of manifestation. So whatever we're thinking of is like planning a future event. When we're worrying, we're planning a future event that we don't want to have happen. So what are we planning? I tell folks, see things as you wish them to be. Only think about what you want to create more of. Stuff happens to everybody. I thought back and I was reading through my notes. It was 3 years ago. And I was going through an extremely large $1 million lawsuit against my company, frivolous lawsuit. At the same time, for 52 days, my mom was in the hospital, most of it in a coma after being bitten by a mosquito and getting West Nile virus. At the same time, my daughter was in the hospital a couple of times, having to deal with that. At the same time, I'm helping Reverend RJ nurse him back to health after a triple bypass surgery. And he's in my home. All of it. You think the universe was trying to tell me something at the time? I mean, when it finally gets to that point, folks, it's just total surrender. Okay, I'm on my knees. Lead me where you need me and guide me in ways that I cannot possibly misunderstand. Okay, I'm starting to get it. And during all of that, all of those fun, wonderful things, you know what my mom calls them? AFGOs. Another fun growth opportunity, we'll call it. All of that's going on. I was going through the end of a 20-year relationship and a marriage and a divorce. So I had it piled on. So stuff happens, but it's not what happens to us. It's how we respond to what happens to us. Everybody has their stuff. We all go through things. It's how we respond to it. Are we going to get up off the mat? Are we going to get back in the game? Are we going to get back in there? That's I think back to that, and I wonder how I fall back asleep sometimes. But even Peggy talked about it. The conscious language stuff that she learned 10 years ago, you just kind of move away from it over time. And then they told me in seminary school, stay awake. You have awakened and stay awake, but you think back about that stuff. And then, some of the most enlightened people, I think, are like Peggy or RJ, and they're human. We're all human. And the stuff that we go through, how could I have forgotten these things? And Peggy talked about that. The problems of our life don't define us, our reactions do. Chris Chenoweth, one of my favorites, says, it isn't the load that breaks us down, it's how we carry it. By choosing better feeling thoughts and by speaking more of what we do want instead of what we don't want, we gently start to pivot and tune our vibrational frequency to source, to creation. And that's where we start to come in alignment with things, and that's how things work for us. See, hard work is not the path to well-being. Feeling good is the path to well-being. We don't create through action, we create through our vibrations. Realizing that there's something that we don't like, that's the first step. And then you start to pivot away from it. The faster we're able to turn our attention in the direction of the solution, the quicker we'll get our problem solved. Because if we're thinking about our problem, we're thinking about the energy of the problem, and that's not the energy of the solution. And there's a huge difference there. When you continue to ask yourself the question, you put yourself in that vibration of the question. But when you quiet your mind so that you're no longer keeping the question active, then the answer can come to us. And because we're not holding ourselves in that tension of the unanswered question, the answer must come. So that's when Abraham, he talks about the reason that they teach meditation is not to get into a thought process of pure thought, it's to get to where there's no thought. And with no thought, then there's no resistance. And when there's no resistance, then there's allowing. And then when there's allowing, that's when we can be still and know that I am and get the answers that come through. This is prayer. This is meditation. Be still and know that I am listening for those answers. Again, you all have heard me say it a million times. I could not be quiet long enough to listen to the answers for so long. But that's changing. Whenever Jesus was asked to heal someone, he would say, do you believe? Which means, can you accept this good that you're asking for? God must respond to a changed mind. That's the law. Prayer doesn't change God. It only changes us. So again, this thought process, what are we creating? Skip asked, what's the title? I said, choose your words wisely. Choose your words wisely. Complaining about anything just holds us in the place of not getting what we want. Blaming, justifying, feeling guilty, or angry about anything just holds us in the place of not getting what we truly want. We've got to shift and think about what we do want. You can't get to where you want by pushing against what you don't want. And this is when I'll get on my soapbox for a minute because I'm the one standing up here. You think about the war on terror. It doesn't work. The war on drugs hasn't worked. The politicians, and I heard Randy talk about it in a minute, so I get to talk about it. We've got lousy choices out there, folks. That's all I'll tell you. There's not a single one of them I'd vote for. They just all scare me. But I have to have faith. I have to believe that all is well. And I really have to believe that because the choices are just not a whole lot of fun right now. But think about it when I say, I'm fighting for this and I'm fighting for that. No. I don't want anybody fighting it. Think about what you're for and not what you're against. That's what I'm looking for in somebody out there. Because we know what you resist will persist. Again, paying specific attention. I am. Well, what am I? Each and every component that makes up our life experience is drawn to us by this powerful law of attraction, responding the thoughts to every thought in the story that we tell about our lives. The very happiness, our experience in general, is all happening because of the words that we use and the story that we tell. Our money, our health, our abundance, our relationships, work, everything. It's all happening because the words that come out of our mouth and the story that we tell. And I was stopped at the end of the service the last time I was here, and I was asked by someone, do you really believe that stuff that you're talking about? And I thought, well, I think I do. And she told me about something absolutely horrific that had happened to her. And she said, you think I caused that? I'm thinking, oh man. I don't have all those answers, folks, but either we believe this stuff or we don't. I'm not sure how I feel about karma, but I know it has an effect on stuff. And so I'm either co-creating with God and Source, and this is happening because of my thought process, or I might be paying a karmic debt. But you try telling that to somebody that's been molested as a child. You try telling that to somebody that's been raped. You try telling that to somebody who's had a relative that's been killed. That's tough. I don't have all the answers, but I either believe in the truth process as I know it, or I don't. And I don't have all those answers, but I know that it's our responsibility. Just think about that word, responsible, able to respond in what we do with it. Letting our message become our mess. That test become our testimony and those types of things. That's what we look at. We always get the essence of what we're thinking about, whether we want it or not. Another concept I learned through NLP which is fantastic, which is why I mentioned a few minutes ago, I don't watch the local news anymore or horror stories and things like that. I pay attention. The universe, the mind, does not know whether you're remembering something, whether you're actually observing or experiencing it, or whether you're imagining it. So instead of thinking about it from the negative standpoint, which I just mentioned about not watching things or whatever, it's fantastic in how you create things. Where you're standing on the blocks and you're about to swim and you're about to dive out there. You have to think about, how am I going to get into the water? How am I going to swim that perfect race? It's the envisioning. It's all in your mind. And so if you haven't done something before, you can imagine it. That's the art of allowing. Because when we tell it like it is, it holds it like it is. Everybody's been to a family reunion, and everybody can outdo each other. Well, I had this surgery the other day, and then you hear well, I had that, and I can outdo you because I had 2 surgeries, or I had this, I had that. Well, tell it like it is if you like it like it is, but if you don't like it like it is, tell a different story. Make it up. Find a different vibration. I was driving Brenda to school one day, and she says, Daddy, how do I create something? And I said, well, sweetheart, you have to be real focused about what you want. And she said, what do you mean? I said, close your eyes. See what you want to see. Hear what you want to hear. Feel what you want to feel. What does it feel like when you have this? How do you feel when you have it? What does it look like? How bright is it? What does it sound like? And she said, I see it. I see it. And she said, Dad, how long will it take me to create this? And I said, well, sweetheart, it all depends on how long it takes you to find a really good feeling and then match it up with what you want to manifest. And she said, well, what do you mean by a good feeling? I said, remember when you got off the roller coaster when you were out in LA at Disneyland with your mom? And she said, yes. And I said, remember how you were just vibrating off the planet and you were excited and all the endorphins and everything? I said, you remember that feeling? And she said, yes. I said, close your eyes, go back, get that feeling. And then I said, now think about what you want. Because it says, as you think in your heart, the heart part is the vibration. You line those two things up and you're cooking on steroids. Man, you're really making things happen. That's how we manifest things. So I want to finish. As I looked back through my notes, I spoke this day exactly 3 months ago. I could have taken that exact same message word for word for today because it was about manifesting. It's always about creating. So I want to finish up with the quotes that I used from Lao Tzu. It said, if you correct your mind, the rest of your life will fall into place, which we all know sounds a lot like Paul in Romans, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The key is to have a disciplined mind to change old thinking habits. The Buddha said, all that we are is the result of what we've thought. The mind is everything. What we think, we become. All that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts, we make our world. So here's to having new thoughts, new vibrations, new energies to create exactly what you want for this year. Namaste.